Man, what is going on? Good evening, guys. Like, I'm not sure what's going on with the school bus, man. It is like I think my wife and I are gonna have to swap at some point. But yeah, thanks for patiently waiting, guys. Today we're in Genesis 50, and I caught something that I'd never seen before, and maybe some of you may have never seen it before as well. But we're gonna be diving deep into it. Let me catch my breath. 1 second. I know real life happens, eh? Jeez, what a day. What a day. Um, who was here yesterday, man? That was all forms of deep. 50th chapter, exactly. We're in Genesis chapter 50. Woo! Amazing, amazing, amazing. And tomorrow we're going to be diving into Matthew chapter 1. And there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there. Awesome. So this is 4:59. I think we're just gonna start. Man, I'm hoping. Oof. Okay, I'm gonna need to. This timing, I know. I guess it's an interesting one for all of us, I guess. But yeah, remember yesterday we spoke about how Jacob blesses all his sons. I don't know if you can call that a blessing. Let's say he blessed some of his sons. And for the others, he prophesied. It's interesting because the end of Genesis 49 actually says that he blessed them. So that was one of the questions I had as well. It's like, oh, at only verse 3 exactly. I mean, whew. But yeah, I think today, let me gather my thoughts. So I think one thing that I'm really hoping that you guys are getting from this Bible study is you get to see what it looks like and what a Bible study experience can be like when you are studying with the author of the book. Right? I've shared this here before that there's a difference when you study the Bible by yourself and when you study it with the author, because you get to see things that the author wanted to write but didn't. Right? It works with every book. It's why you have book readings and all that. Like someone is about to release a book and then they invite a few people to talk about it, and they give you a lot more insight beyond what was written. What inspired this? It wasn't captured, but it was right there, right? So let me share my screen. We're going to get into Genesis 50. Someone just said, I'm going to miss Genesis. I know. Same here. So Genesis 50, we're going to do a bit of background. Yesterday, I could only get to verse 3 or 4 of chapter 49. So we actually missed out on a lot of things that I wanted to talk about in Genesis 49. So we're just going to do a brief, I'm just going to touch on a few things, right? So beginning of Genesis 49, we see that Jacob is prophesying over his 12 sons who would later become the future 12 tribes of Israel. Right? We saw how Reuben, even though he wasn't disowned or disinherited, he was demoted because of his rebellion, because he slept with his father's wife as an act of rebellion. And so we then went into the prophecy that Jacob told him. He said, you will be like turbulent waters. And that took us into a whole nother realm. But I want you to imagine Reuben, all his sons are there expecting a blessing, expecting their inheritance. Can you imagine being Simeon and Levi listening to what Reuben has just received from their father? It's like, man, something that happened over 40 years ago. Jacob has remembered and is prophesying based on that. Now remember that Simeon and Levi also had something in their closet. They also did something that angered Jacob. So you can imagine they're probably like, uh-oh, I thought he had forgotten about ours. Or is it like we're thinking that this stuff wouldn't come back again? Remember when Shechem defiled their sister Dinah or Dinah? Exactly, Judah too. And they went and killed all the men who lived in Shechem at the time. And Jacob was so angry that they had to relocate. And so you can imagine, after hearing Reuben's prophecy, Simeon and Levi are next. And they're nervous. And Jacob tells them, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join the assembly. And so it's interesting that the first three sons of Jacob seem to have received a bad prophecy or a curse. But one question that I had here is that how come we don't hear of the tribe of Reuben? Neither do we hear about the tribe of Simeon because of these prophecies. But why is it that we all of a sudden are hearing about the tribe of Levi? Because the Levites eventually became the priests. That was the question I had. And that question led me to Exodus chapter 32, verse 25. And it got me thinking, we're going to get into Genesis 50 in a second, but I just want to share this. It got me thinking that all these prophecies that happened, was there a lifeline? Was there an opportunity for the tribes to not reverse the prophecy, but to receive a blessing out of it? And I'm going to tell you why I say that in a second, because the Levites did something different. Remember when at the mountain when Moses went up to spend time with God, and everyone at the bottom ended up creating an idol. They created a golden calf. Who remembers that? Verse 25, Moses saw that the people were running wild and that Aaron had let them get out of control, and so become a laughing stock to their enemies. So he stood at the entrance of the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." And all the Levites rallied to him. And because they did that, then he said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Each man strap his sword to his side, go back and forth through the camp from one end to the other, each killing his brother and friend and neighbor." The Levites did as Moses commanded, and that day about 3,000 of the people died. Then Moses said, "You have been set apart to the Lord today, for you were against your own sons' brothers, and he has blessed you this day." The Levites stood with Moses. And instead of their tribe disappearing like Reuben and Simeon did, they became prominent. They became one of the prominent tribes, the tribes that will release the priests in Israel. So it got me thinking, I don't know, like, is it possible that there were opportunities for the curse to be reversed? They were redeemed. I like that. Right? Where is Adrienne today? Is she here? Right? And so, again, does this indicate that other tribes also had chances to be redeemed? Oh, she's there. Okay. Awesome. There we go. Someone said, what about Judah? Exactly. Judah as well also had a lot of things in his closet. So I knew this was going to happen. Anyway, let's get to Genesis 50 real quick. So, one second. What's going on? So Genesis 50 starts off with Joseph. So at the end of Genesis 49, Jacob then dies. And when he dies, Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. It's interesting that when Jacob would die, he knew he would die. And when I was studying this, it just occurred to me that there's a difference between being killed and dying. I feel like being killed means that you go before your time. Dying means that you're going at the appropriate time. There's a confession that I say every day. I say, in my capacity as God's son, I cannot be killed. I will not die like an ordinary man. I will not die like an ordinary man. I love the way Jacob knew when he would die. I will not die like an ordinary man. Maybe someone needs to begin confessing that, because Psalm 82 verse 6. Let me read it real quick. Psalm 82 verse 6. Psalm 82 verse 6 says that I said, you are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High, but you shall die like men, like ordinary men, and fall like one of the princes. We've been redeemed. That's not going to be our portion. I will not die like an ordinary man. So let's set the scene here, because again, Jacob has just died, and you can imagine all the sons are right there around him. What is the disposition of the sons right now? Reuben is probably thinking, like, what is going on? This wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting the blessing of the firstborn, the double portion of the blessing, and all of a sudden he's saying that I'm no longer going to excel. So Jacob has died. All the sons have received different prophecies. Some have been blessed. Some have been prophesied doom. Some have been prophesied good. So it's a mixture of emotions at this point. Judah and Joseph received the most blessings. When you read Genesis 49, they're excited. Their dad has died. They're sad and excited at the same time. Zebulun, Issachar, Dan, Gad, Asher, and Naphtali, they received bits and parts here and there from Jacob. Benjamin also. But Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, they're sad. Are they filled with regret? Are they angry at this point? And then remember, the sons of Joseph were also there, Ephraim and Manasseh. In their mind, are they like awkward? Like awkward? Like, we just heard what our Uncle Reuben did back in the day that we weren't even aware of. Like, oops. Like, Uncle, why would you do that, man? You know? But then it says that then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel. And you're going to see something that I found in this chapter. You know, I've always believed that Joseph was a ruler in Egypt his entire life. And even though he was, I'm going to show you something that might be indicative of an identity crisis that he may have had. And we're going to learn something from this chapter. We're going to learn something from this chapter. So, question that I had here is, why did Joseph embalm Jacob's body? Why did Joseph embalm Israel? Right? To embalm something means to preserve it. So why was he preserving it? Remember, Jacob has said, do not bury me in Egypt. Make sure you take me back to Canaan. Canaan is at least a 2 to 4 week journey. And if you look at this, it says it will take 40 days to embalm his body. And also, they were mourning for him for 70 days. So, is it possible that they had to embalm his body so that it could prolong his body for the burial that would happen in Canaan? Because they mourned for 70 days. There's no way his body would have decomposed after the mourning. It's a combination of these things. Simon is saying tradition. Someone is saying taking back to Israel. I feel like it's a combination of both, because Jacob was Joseph's dad. He had the type of mourning that kings and royalty would have back in Egypt. They mourn him for 70 days. If an ordinary man died, I'm not sure they're mourning him for 70 days, right? So I think it's a mixture of tradition and the fact that they had to transport his body to Canaan, right? So that's why he's asking them to embalm his body. Well, it says, but when the days of mourning were over, when the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, if I found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me and tell him that my father made me swear an oath and said, I'm about to die, bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. Now let me go up and bury my father, then I'll return. Now, when I read this, I paused because I saw something that doesn't make sense. Why is it that Joseph at this point isn't speaking to Pharaoh directly, but he's speaking to Pharaoh's court? Another translation says he spoke to Pharaoh's household, and he's telling them to speak to Pharaoh on his behalf. What had happened to Joseph? Remember, we've been studying Genesis. If you go back to Genesis 41, verse 40, this was when he had interpreted Pharaoh's dream. And Pharaoh said, you shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the Pharaoh will I be greater than you. Ooh, I didn't even think about another Pharaoh. That's one option. That's one option. Pharaoh's son? I think because even in Genesis 46, when he was 39 years old, when his household came, when Jacob and all his brothers came, he said, I'm going to go speak to Pharaoh. So he still had direct access. But is it possible that at some point Joseph lost the access that he had to Pharaoh? Had Joseph been retired due to age? I like how we're thinking here. We don't know. A long time has passed. Exactly. Remember, Joseph came in because of the 14-year season that we're going to be, where there'll be 7 years of abundance, 7 years of famine.